We're now less than a week out from the EU parliamentary elections in the United Kingdom, and Nigel Farage's Brexit Party continues to dominate. A poll out today from YouGov shows that the Brexit Party has now hit a record high of 35% support in their poll. The previous record was set in the previous poll that YouGov did, and that was at 34% support. Now, in the time since I last discussed the EU elections, the Brexit Party has only continued to rise, and the major parties, interestingly enough, have continued to fall fairly evenly. It seems like it's not like the Tories are shedding votes to Labour or anything like that. They're both shedding support to not only the Brexit Party, but also the Lib Dems and the Greens, and, well, that Change UK thing is they're kind of sticking in there. They'll get a few seats. The exact numbers in this poll for every party are 35, of course, for the Brexit Party, 16 for the Liberal Democrats. The Labour, all the way back in third in this poll at 15%. That's kind of low for them. The Greens are sitting at 10%, and Change UK is back at 5%. UKIP, of course, continuing their downward trend since the founding of the Brexit Party, all the way down at 3%. So while UKIP did quite well in the last EU elections, it seems like they've shed nearly all their support to, I would assume, the Brexit Party. Now, it'll be interesting to see just how far off this poll is, because if Labour does in fact come in third, that will be quite a wake-up call, I think, for Mr. Corbyn and his people. Because I think, a lot of people, and again, I don't live in the UK, so it's harder for me to gauge, but everybody pretty much knows that in his heart, Jeremy Corbyn believes in Brexit and he hates the EU. So I really think that it was a strategic blunder for Jeremy Corbyn not to fight the fight within Labour to try and make that a pro-Brexit party, in going back to their, sort of traditional working-class roots. Because you already had the schism now with Change UK, and I think that would have been a perfect opportunity for Corbyn really to excise all of the Remainers from Labour. Because, it's not like he has nothing to lose by staying in this neutral position and sort of leaning towards Remain, at least in public. Because it seems to me that he's clearly losing working-class Labour voters to the Brexit Party, because, it's kind of a thing that traditional Labour voters would approve of. The whole idea that you're going to have folks in Brussels dictating what your laws are, and especially when it's, a very corporatist sort of EU bureaucracy that is the antithesis of everything I think that the Labour Party once stood for. And not to mention that it's kind of, I would think, Corbyn's responsibility as a thought leader on the left in the United Kingdom, that if he thinks that this is truly right and he thinks that the Remainers on the left are wrong, he should stand up and fight for that. He shouldn't try to play this mushy middle position so that he appeases all people within the Labour Party, because, again, he's created that schism anyway. Although perhaps he feels that if he were to come out explicitly in favor of Brexit, that his leadership position would be at stake, and that probably would be true. But really, if Labour ends up coming in third place here, can he really have said to have what would his compromise had really gained him? He sacrificed essentially his principles for what? Third place? How much worse would Labour be doing right now if they did in fact try to have a clean break with the Remainers on the left and really come out hard for Brexit, as I think Jeremy Corbyn would if he were being honest with himself? Frankly, I think they've lost quite a bit of Remain supporters anyway, considering how well that Change UK and the Greens are doing. In this poll, Change UK and the Greens put together have the same amount of support as Labour. And the Tories, of course, are languishing back in third to last place with only 9%. But that's not surprising. At this point, the Tories are not a serious party. They stand for nothing. They've never really stood for anything in particular, but they've at least had their placeholder position as, hey guys, we're not the left. But with May in there, they can't even credibly make that case. Honestly, I don't even know why Theresa May gets out of bed in the morning. She has no future. She's accomplished nothing. She will be remembered as a terrible failure, and I don't know why she goes on. If I were her, I would have resigned a long time ago and taken my retirement and went off and enjoyed my life. I mean, frankly, if she was a Remainer to begin with, although she came in to sort of direct the Brexit process, either go all in on one or the other. If you want to sabotage Brexit, I think she should go in harder in it than she has and make it explicitly clear that as long as I'm in office, that's not going to happen. And if that means that she gets, voted out through a vote of no confidence, then she should accept her fate. But I mean, the duplicity of this woman is astounding from an outsider's perspective. And I say duplicity because I find it hard to believe that this is just sheer incompetence. Because if this woman was truly incompetent and she really did want to achieve Brexit, you would have think that she would have resigned and tried to get somebody else who was perhaps had a better shot than she does. Because she has to recognize just what a failure she's been. Although perhaps we can hope that Miss May will resign after these EU parliamentary elections if the Tories do end up in single digits, just in the same way that David Cameron resigned after Leave won. Now, if you look at the chart of the polling averages over the last few weeks, it's very clear that the Brexit Party has a strong upward momentum and that they continue to gain support, and that both Labour and the Tories have continued to plummet. The average for the Brexit Party currently sits at about 31%. Labour is averaging about 21%, and the Tories are averaging about 12%. Now, as you can probably tell, this poll shows that the downward and upward respective trends have continued for all three of these parties, as the Brexit Party is polling above average, and that Labour and the Tories are both polling below their average. So therefore, if the trend continues into this week, we should expect that the Tories should be around 10%, if not below, in the single-digit range. The Labour could be at or below 20%, and the Brexit Party is likely going to be somewhere around the mid-30s. I think that there is almost a guarantee at this point that the Brexit Party will be the largest British party represented in the European Parliament. And it seems that the British parties are following a similar trend to the rest of Europe, oddly enough, considering that they're trying to leave the EU, and that the mainstream parties really are fading all around. Your center-left and center-right parties across Europe are struggling, as it were. It seems that the general consensus across most of these countries is that people prefer principle over moderation. So it'll be interesting to see how this trend across Europe affects the next British parliamentary election. That is the domestic parliament, not the EU parliament. Oh, and before I forget, UKIP is all the way down there at 3%. They're projected, as of now, to gain 0 seats. They'll be lucky to squeak it out with 1 seat. And this is a massive collapse from their last showing in the European elections, in which they gained 24 seats, I believe, the last time. But it looks like they're moving away from being a strictly independence party to a more continental-style nationalist party has not worked out well for them at all. Even the star power of Count Dankula and Sargon Avocad and Paul Joseph Watson, 3 very popular men on the YouTubes, they couldn't even lift them out of the single-digit range. Frankly, I found it odd that particularly Sargon would hitch his wagon to UKIP all of a sudden, just as UKIP really, at least in my opinion, kind of went off the deep end in being a more continental-style party. And, being an American, I kind of like to think of, the Anglosphere right wing as being different from the European right wing. But UKIP seemed to be moving towards in the direction of, Le Pen and Geert Wilders. And I don't just mean on the immigration stuff. I mean, being skeptical of immigration is fine. There's plenty of that here in the United States, and I think in Australia too. But they seem to move away from, the more basic principles of classical liberalism. In other words, they didn't really seem to care much about liberty anymore, which, as an American, I followed UKIP for quite a few years, hoping that they would do better in UK politics when they were led by Farage, precisely because I saw him as very much a fellow traveler. And frankly, I thought the same thing of folks like Sargon when he became, before he was popular on YouTube. I've been watching him for quite a few years. So I would think that old Sargon, if he were to join a political party and run for office, it would have been this Brexit Party over UKIP. And I do understand that I believe the whole Paul Joseph Watson, Count Dankula, Sargon invasion of UKIP occurred before the Brexit Party was founded. So I guess you can kind of give them a bit of an out on that. But from what I understand, their goal was to sort of root out the Farage-type people within UKIP. I mean, there were still some people who I followed in UKIP that were essentially driven out by Gerard Batten and the YouTubers. I can't remember his name now, but he was a UKIP MEP, and he switched to the Brexit Party and is running with them in this election. So thankfully, he's going to keep his seat. Darn it, I can't remember his name. He was also a member of the Scottish Libertarian Party for a hot second, about a month maybe. But anyway, I think that the polling results of UKIP show that pretty decisively that the supporters of people who were into UKIP were there because they cared about, UK independence, not, nationalist populism or whatever Steve Bannon likes to call it. So in the next 6 days, I'm assuming that nothing too catastrophic happens, and in the meantime, I'm pretty optimistic about next Thursday's election. I think things will go very well for the Brexit Party and for Brexit in general. I hope, for the sake of the British people, that they do achieve their hard Brexit that they've worked so long for, and of course, hard Brexit is really the only Brexit. If you keep any legal ties to the EU, you're not an independent country. So if you gained anything of value from this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and subscribing. And if you do subscribe, please do click the bell, because I do upload every day, and I'm going to move, now that things have calmed down with Iran and Venezuela, I think, I'm going to move more towards back to doing politics and less war and peace stuff, but I'll still have that all sprinkled in there, so I guess I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.